Welcome to Shutter and Flow. Today, Jeremy and I have some really interesting things to talk about. There was just an article that I read about J.Crew using AI imagery for their social accounts. It looks like a marketing campaign. If you just were to scroll by it quickly, you would not realize that it was AI generated. They did not say that it was AI generated when they initially put it out there. And since having a little bit of backlash, they now are saying that it is digital art and accrediting the creator. And so this is kind of huge, right? This is a big brand that is now testing the waters and using AI generated images as opposed to using actual photography shot by a real photographer, sent through real post production. And I thought we would hit this moment in a few years from now. I'm a little surprised that it's starting now. But we've already seen some other things. I think Coca-Cola did a video test that was AI, but this is starting now. So this is kind of a big deal. We wanted to talk about this, and I will show the article in a little bit, and I will also show J.Crew's Instagram account so we can take a look at the actual images. But before we jump all the way into what's happening now with AI and photography and how it's going to completely change the industry, we want to rewind a little bit all the way back to the early 2000s when film photography is what everybody knew and what everyone had ever done, and digital came on the scene. Because back then I remember reading the headline of an article that said, "Is photography dead?" And this was in the early 2000s. So this shift with AI is a huge parallel for that. So today, that's what we're going to kind of start with. Jeremy, you went through all of that. You went through the film to digital transition, like right in the thick of it.
Yeah, I mean, when we were in school together at the Art Institute, rest in peace, we took darkroom classes. We were one of the last groups to have that be mandatory as part of our learning. And I think the first maybe 2 years that we were in school was film. And it really more because the technology wasn't up to par to meet there. I mean, I remember, what was it? The 10D from Canon came out, and it's like
the cards were 256
megabytes
cards.
Yeah, I have one sitting on my desk, not here, but up in the house, and it's literally a mini hard drive.
Yeah, they're
like
huge.
A spinning hard drive inside of the card. And yeah, I remember us learning in darkroom, taking it out. Who was it? Jay Pritchard or some one of our people was the first one to get a Nikon digital camera, and we used it. We had some higher end stuff that we would use, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's going to change it," but it's just growing, and I think that's what's important for all of these is if you grow with it and don't look at it as changing everything, there's ways to work with it and make it go. And I do think the higher end stuff, for the most part, is going to still be fine. But then it goes into the digital side of it from retouching. I think about, we had an old colleague who he started off on the original Photoshop. And before that, he would hand paint images. That's how retouching started. They would take a print, go in there with hand paint it, and then photograph that, and that would be the image.
That's where retouching kind of came from, right? It was people who were actually touching, right, with a little paintbrush. Sometimes they would do it on film, sometimes on print. It just kind of depended how they did it. And all those techniques came from darkroom techniques. And then all of the early Photoshop tools, because I started using Photoshop, I don't know, Photoshop 4? I don't know. I can't even remember. It was so long ago. All of the tools were mimicking darkroom tools, right? Dodge and burn, like some resizing stuff. Yeah, the lollipop. All of those things. And that is kind of the early days, right? Things were still being shot on film. Digital was being tested, but it wasn't being used really, not professionally for a while. And then you started to see high-end digital backs coming out that replaced medium formats on commercial shoots. And as DSLRs got better, slowly over time, those just overtook all the film cameras. And it didn't change necessarily what photographers were doing because photographers were still shooting photos, right? Some people who didn't transition from film to digital got a little stuck. They probably weren't doing as much work because all of the workflows switched from film to digital. And people who didn't know kind of how to do that were in a bit of a bind. But in general, pretty much everybody, it created new jobs in a way, right? All of a sudden, there were people that were needed, but also part of the industry kind of went away, right? I remember a ton of film processing labs and people who worked in the processing of film, and that was part of the photo industry, and that just went away. And so I think that is the parallel I want to draw here a little bit, which is I don't necessarily think that there will not be jobs in the photo industry, that there won't be people shooting things, that there won't be people doing post-production, but I think it is going to shift the roles of people and what they're doing. So I guess with that, let's actually, I guess, show some of this because it is really interesting. I'm going to start with showing actually the LinkedIn account so that we can look at the images. And then I want to kind of show a little bit of this article that points out some of the things. So this is one of the images. If you're listening, we'll drop some links in later. But basically they edited this to say digital art. When they first released this, they didn't until they received some backlash that some things were obviously built by AI. This was only put on social, but I could easily see them creating imagery like this without real photography for all kinds of things, right? Maybe not a huge advertising campaign or marketing campaign anytime soon, but email promotions, other types of marketing assets that are needed. I think that this is kind of the start of this. And they created a handful of images. These were all for this Vans with J.Crew. Maybe they chose to do this because I don't know why. I mean, these all mimic it. They're retro, like 1980s looking images that were actually shot back in the day. And they
and they're
basically
made to look like their old catalogs and things like that. So when I think about this, and I will apologize if there's a tractor noise in the background, there's somebody just doing work next door. But I think about what it would take for a full-on photo shoot to get all the styling, all the locations, all the things, and you want to go for that look. And look, it's very doable. And they have obviously made the decision of let's find a cheaper way to do that and go from there.
right. And if it's for social media and that was the intent, and they wanted to nail that look, they may have decided to run this as a test, and then somebody in-house said, wow, this is better than we thought it would look as a test doing it with AI. Let's just use that and go with it, right? Which potentially could be the case. So I want to show you the article. So this was on Blackbird Spy Plane, which is a blog, and they do a really good job of pointing out all of the little things that you see that were AI, because this is something that's going to happen more and more where there are AI generated images that, unless you really look closely at them, they have gotten so good that you're not going to really be able to tell. And especially if you're just scrolling in a social media feed. So you guys can check this out. I think some of them are pretty egregious. Like if you look under this leg here, stuff like that, it's pretty obvious. But other things are a little less noticeable. So I don't know. Take a look.
Well,
Make
and I
up your
think it's a
minds for
fascinating
yourselves.
discussion just in general because look, even in Photoshop, how many times have we seen images where there's an extra arm? And this is not even with AI. This is before AI.
Yep. This is just
That
compositing.
yeah, it's like that someone didn't pay attention, the wrong version made it out, something along those lines. Obviously, with compositing, you've done major composites. That happens very often. So, should that have been labeled digital art, even though it starts from a real photo? I know it all comes down to the big thing is where is it generative or not? Did it start from something?
Right. And I think that's where all this is going. If I had to make like a prediction, I would think that at some point there we do need people to shoot things in the real world, right? Because like take the Vans shoes for instance in that ad. Um they've had to have taken those from those shoes being photographed in some kind of which way. If they wanted to use a specific model, they would need photos of that model. If they wanted to use a specific location, they would probably need photos of that location. Any company that releases a new product, right? AI doesn't know what that product looks like. So somebody would actually need to photograph that, or locations, exact same thing, right? New hotel is built. AI has no idea what the hotel looks like. Somebody has to go
Mhm.
and photograph it. However, I do think that at some point, there's probably going to be a new role like internal in agencies and a lot of companies. Any brand is going to have somebody who is some sort of AI prompt engineer with a photography background, somebody who can take the images that were taken in person and then prompt the AI to create something else with whatever they're missing that they need to composite. Then they'll probably generate some sort of rough composites, and then you'll probably have somebody who's high skilled in post production go over that with a fine tooth comb, re-edit some things. I kind of see it as a team effort. I mean, it's the same thing that happened when digital started. Is you didn't have digital techs and you did not have as many people doing retouching, definitely not. So it created kind of these new roles and responsibilities for what happens after a photo is taken. I do think the worry that I have is that people are going to get carried away at some point when AI gets good enough, and there will just be less shoots. Anytime there's an argument about how large a marketing budget is, they're going to save money by not doing 20, 30, 40, $50,000 shoots. And they're going to say, what can we get away with by repurposing images? They already do that and repurpose images as much as possible by taking something that's already shot, running it back through post-production. Maybe they'll change the color of something because they don't want to reshoot something or whatever it is. That is going to happen. But I think if companies are still going to want to build new and creative things, and in order to do that, you still need real people to do it. And in order to make sure that you don't have photos with people with six fingers or their foot tongue turned the wrong way, or if an article of clothing is actually supposed to look like the article of clothing in real life, like somebody still has to shoot that. Somebody still has to make sure that it gets composited correctly. AI is never going to get to the point where it understands exactly what not just one person, but a team of people, like what their intent is. So I think we're in an interesting time. We're kind of right at the beginning of all of this, and it's going to be wildly different in a few years.
Yeah, and I think one, I'm just gonna start a new career, photography prompt expert, and just all I'll have to do is take all the photography terminology, throw it into the prompt, and I'll be done.
Well,
Uh,
that's
there
pretty
could be a
much
job there.
what the person who did this digital art is. If you look at his website, you will see that he is a AI photographer or photographer with something. His photographer's in the title. I don't know how he created these images, but he is calling himself a photographer, even though he didn't shoot anything. So you're not far off in
Yeah,
saying that.
and I do think that there is a career there for someone, at large companies or agencies, like you said, because right now what you have is you have a lot of more technical people and coming from the tech space, less from the creative space that are doing these things. Um, so I'm not saying it's the way it's going to go, but it could, and who knows where it'll end up. Uh, Look, we've seen so many. Everyone likes to freak out and say it's going to change. I remember when digital billboards became a thing. And that was another one where people were like, they won't use photos anymore. They'll only use video and they'll be moving everything. It didn't happen. It happened a little bit. It doesn't happen. But there's so much more content that has to be put out now for Instagram, for social, for all these different platforms, including print ads and billboards for all these campaigns. It is hard to keep up with all of it. So I could see these companies using this as a get a quick something out there for social, and you hope that they're just doing it right. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you might be right there where some companies in the next few years might decide, hey, we're not going to have a lot of budget that we're currently using go for social. We're going to take that budget, we're going to reallocate it so that we can really afford to do great shoots for our actual marketing campaigns. And things for social, we're going to start just making a lot more AI generated stuff. Not all of it, but maybe some of it. And that's potential. But I think anything that a company does, they're going to test things out on a small scale. They're going to see how cost effective it is. They're going to see how actually effective it is as a campaign. And then they're going to go from there. J.Crew, after this just happened, and they kind of got caught doing it by not actually putting that it was AI generated or anything like that. I'm guessing they're going to probably not do this a lot. Like, I don't know, potentially, but other brands certainly will. I mean, other brands don't have as much money as them. So I just think that it's inevitable that this is going to happen. I just think that people need to think about what they're doing in the industry, what their place is. And I think the antidote for this, instead of freaking out, is saying, how can I still create things that are original and creative, regardless of what tools I'm using to do that? Because if you're constantly creative and doing something that is different, that can't be replaced by anything. It doesn't matter what the tool is, whether it's a film camera, a digital camera, AI. That doesn't matter. If you're good at what you do and you're super creative, you're still going to have a job in the industry. It might change a little what your job is, but you'll still be doing something.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of products or cars or things like that that have been big ads that are completely computer generated in different forms. It wasn't what everyone wants to call AI now, which most of it's not technically AI, but we'll save that argument for another day. But the number of things that were Coke bottles or cans or beer cans, all these different things that label may have not even been made yet, and they create it in some form of digital. So there's a person making it, and that's the difference.
I can tell you exactly what it is. There are people that are called render artists, and those people essentially are high-end retouchers, people that kind of come from the post-production world, and they are creating something through vector layers, basically, that looks photorealistic. And you just don't know that it's not. And a lot of times it is using product stuff. That's kind of the use for it, right? You're not going to be able to sort of render a person like that, but that's where AI is better, right? Like that's where AI can come in and do that. And so I don't know, maybe it's a combination of using all of those things. Somebody shoots something, somebody renders something, somebody generates something with AI, those things get put together, and then you end up with exactly what the art director or creative director is looking um, for probably less money. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think it's a combination of doing it all together and making it the best product possible. Then I feel like that gets into, is there how does it get labeled? And I think that's the thing that all these companies, Instagram has tried it where it's like marked as AI made or AI whatever. But at what point does it cross that threshold? If you use Photoshop and take out something in the background with generative fill that's technically using AI, but it's something I could also sit there and do it with a clone stamp. It just take a little bit longer, or whatever tools that you're much better at than I am. How do you label it? At what level of creativity does it turn into this is an AI generated image
And
versus something else?
this was an early discussion when Photoshop became big, to whether or not to credit the digital artist, and when do you credit a digital artist. What ended up happening is digital artists just never really got credited for anything. So there are definitely things that I've built that I would say are 100% rebuilt, right? Every little piece, every shadow, every little thing is built in Photoshop, but you're also using images that were taken. It kind of used to be, I think, a rule of thumb was if it was like 50% or 60% more digitally created, you could credit the artist, but that never ended up taking off. That never really happened. I think that's going to be the case with AI. If a camera was never used to photograph something, can you call it a photo? Um, and I think that's going to be the biggest distinction. At that point, it's just digital art, right? It's the same thing as a graphic designer building something. It's digital, right? And I think that's where it gets tricky. And I think that's where people are just not going to label things. They should. I think they really should. But I don't think there's much of a way to label it unless all of the creators of the AI tools and Adobe implement something that is in the metadata that gets tagged when these things are created. And then anywhere you see them pulls those tags and shows you what it is. But I just, if you leave it up to a company, they're not going to tell you. They don't want to. They're selling a product and they don't really care.
And there is a push for that. And the issue on that is no one can agree on the best way to do it. So there's different ways that I've listened to a few things about that or read articles where there's different groups trying to push it a different way and they won't agree on it. So then it's like if two different people are doing it different ways, you can't see it and it doesn't show up, then there's no real answer to it.
Yeah, and the genie's out of the bottle, right? There's no putting the genie back in the bottle with AI. It's out there. And so people are already using it. People are writing with it an incredible amount without even rewriting anything and copying and pasting. If you ever look anywhere online and you see writing and you see a bunch of there's signs, right? Just like in the images where it's like horizontal dashes everywhere, or like there's just something about the language you can tell. That is, it's happening already, right? And I do think that by and large, you just kind of have to roll with it and just understand that it's happening, right? I mean, best case scenario, you learn the tools yourself, you figure out how to make it work with whatever you're doing now.
Yeah. And even ChatGPT has added a watermark of sort that you can go in there and find for those type of things. As I just got an Instagram ad of like how to get rid of the ChatGPT watermark. And I'm like, but okay. It's like that
Yeah.
everyone's always going to find a workaround.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the biggest thing on all of these is you have to put the effort in to double check everything. Don't trust it fully, and you really have to go with it. Um, so let's jump on real quick to the next where Photoshop has been adding some new stuff in their new beta because it all goes along with this. Um, they added AI powered harmonize, which basically it's trying to take your compositing work away from you.
Yeah.
Um, you take one image that may not match at all, lighting wise, anything, drop it into another image, and it's supposed to sync them together. Um, I haven't played with it yet. I was about to
Yeah. I
download it
haven't played
before
with
this
it
call.
either. I have thoughts on how well it's going to do based off of the other AI generated stuff I've seen in Photoshop. Um, but like you said before, sometimes if something's really low end, people will probably use it. And the higher end it goes, the more you need something to be pixel perfect. They won't. And so a lot of these AI tools in Photoshop that I've seen so far, they're fine if you're going super low end. If the higher end you go, you still have to go in and change everything. I imagine Harmonize is going to be similar to that. Even generative fill, things like that. Like I kind of use them as a tool and then redo everything that was done. So I imagine this is going to be similar.
Yeah, and then they also added upscale, where it's supposed to take a low res image and really use AI to smooth it out. I don't know if it's adding more pixels, all these different things, but the technology's there to do it. I really want to test with it and see if it
How
is
good it
useful.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's already something that's in Photoshop for people who don't use Photoshop that much, right? We have to upres things all the time in the real world. A lot of times something is shot and all of a sudden they want it like twice the size or twice the dimensions. The old school way of doing it is about 5% at a time, because what Photoshop is essentially doing is there's an algorithm built in that it looks at the pixels around the pixels it's building, and it's building new pixels based off of those. So there's already an algorithm that's doing that. I'm assuming this is basically just using AI to make it a little more aggressive, where you can go from like a tiny little JPEG and build it into something that's good enough quality for a huge print or something. I don't know why somebody would need to do that, but there might be a use case for it.
Yeah, I think that it could. I'm curious how it would handle with images that are, like low light, high ISO. Like I could see it being more useful there, or
Mm-hmm.
fixing some of the grain that's the digital grain versus film grain that just doesn't look as nice. But I don't. I'll try it out and see. We'll
Yeah.
report back on that.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see that too. And this is going to keep happening. Adobe's just going to keep adding these kind of AI features, and eventually it's going to get really good at handling some of these things. But from what I've seen right now, it's just not at a place where you can just go in Photoshop and make something that looks incredible, that looks better than what a digital artist can probably do in less time than it's taking you to try to figure out how to do it in there. This is another point for prompting an AI and image generation and all that. If you haven't done it, try it. Go on ChatGPT and think of something and have it generate the image you want, then tell it to make changes and try to get it to do exactly what you want. It is not easy. You are not going to get exactly what you want. You have to kind of know the prompts. You have to know how to do it. And then over and over again, it's time consuming. It's not that it's not time consuming, right? I imagine it took somebody a really long time to get those J.Crew images to look as good as they do. And that person was paid a lot less to do it than it would cost to run a whole shoot. But that person definitely spent a lot of time doing that.
I would be curious to how much they got paid, because I could
Same.
see it actually paying pretty well on
Yeah,
that
I
level.
imagine on that level, I do. I imagine, right? I mean, I imagine that they're just getting paid per image, and it's quite a bit of money, but still less than what it would cost J.Crew to hire a crew to go shoot anything.
And it just made me think of, it is not paying for a model and not paying for
No
usage of
usage
a
rights.
model.
No usage
Usage right
rights.
on models is way more than you would expect it to be on
Yeah.
something, a big campaign like that. Um, so yeah, there could be a lot of that, which is very interesting, because that's another person who wouldn't be getting a job.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, unless what they did is use the model's likeness and then they still have to pay the model. We don't know. We don't know what they did. So there's potential there. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
going to
it's a
be a
good.
really wild west it's going to be the wild west for the next couple years, I think, with AI.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is, don't be scared of it. Embrace what you can do to use it. Push it to see what works and what doesn't work, and then use what you can to help you and help your
Yeah.
life. But it's never going to be as high quality at least for a while, that it needs to be.
Cool. I think that's a good place to wrap it up for today. I guess everyone out there, don't worry, stay creative. Photography's not dead.
No.
Same as it wasn't 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. I just got a call about a good job coming up in like 2 weeks. So it's fine. You're going to be okay.
But I think this is an interesting conversation to keep having. So when we see like big kind of little markers and events like this, we'll probably keep bringing it up and talking about it, just because this is what you and I would talk about anyway if we weren't recording this for a podcast.
100%. That's pretty much what we do anyways. I'm about to make you help me with some retouching after this call. So that's great.
Great. All right. Thanks everyone for listening and watching.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.